This is part of the This Is Your Brain On series. This is your brain on junk food. Well, we'll get there in a minute. So I've always loved historical photos and looking at how people lived, how they looked, how they were 100, 150, even 200 years ago now, I guess, almost. And looking at pictures of people from the Civil War, looking at pictures of people from the late 19th century. And I find it extraordinary to look at photos, cityscapes of people standing on the street in 1920 New York or 1920 London, and also and then more recently to compare concert crowd scenes from the 60s and 70s and 80s, early 80s, to concert scenes today, and also to compare beach scenes from, Venice Beach in 1972 versus the beach today. And one of the things that, and I'm not the only person who's remarked on this, one of the things that you really see moving from the 60s and 70s through today is just how much larger people have become. And if you look at the photos of people in New York City or London circa 1920, it's like everyone is slender, almost everyone. And it's the same with the photos of the concerts from the 60s and 70s. And I went to a ton of concerts in the late 70s and early 80s. And I remember thinking at the time, just noticing, and I was in 1979, I was 6 feet tall, 140 pounds. I was a skinny teenager, but I remember thinking how slender most everybody was at the concerts. And I think a lot of the difference is the change in diet, that it was in the 1970s that they really started pushing for the low-fat, high-carb diet. And I think we are seeing the effects of high carbs on everyone, from children to the elderly. And another part of this that I've noticed, and I don't think this is me simply getting older, but I've noticed that people's complexions seem to be getting worse too. And there's a sort of decline in generalized sense of health when you look at someone. And I say this as someone who is on the downward slope of my own health. And I also say this as someone who could easily argue that, potatoes are my totem being, and they are my spirit being, if we're going to go that direction. They are potato chips, call my name. And if I could live on potato chips, if there was one food I could eat at every single meal and it would not make me unhealthy, I would eat potato chips for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, so my name is Derek, and I am addicted to potato chips. I am powerless over this addiction. And no, it's actually, well, I am. Some people cannot have chocolate in their house because if they do, they eat it. I can have chocolate and I can, eat one little piece of chocolate every 4 days. It's not a big deal to me. But potato chips, if there is an open bag of potato chips in the house, it will be empty by the end of the day. And so I'm not saying this looking on the outside going, junk food is destroying people's lives. I am looking at this saying, wow, my A1C is too high. I'm going to have another handful of potato chips. By the way, I just want to say this too while I'm talking about potato chips, that they always say on the bag that one serving size is like a half dozen chips. a half dozen chips is how many you eat while you're deciding whether you're going to eat potato chips. But anyway, it's interesting because, study after study has been done on the addictiveness of so much of this junk food. It's like McDonald's, they figured out the right combo of salty, sweet, just the right combo to get you to come back, even though, I grow mealworms because they eat styrofoam. And one of the things I do is I feed them lettuce. And sometimes the lettuce that I get is rotten, and I wouldn't eat it, but it's still good enough to give to the mealworms. And there's a smell that I did not know until I was raising mealworms and coming across rotten lettuce. There's a smell that I typically associated with Big Macs, which it ends up is overdone, is overaged lettuce. That is, for me, the smell of a Big Mac is like, I always, I'd eat it and it's like, this has this weird smell. And anyway, the point is these foods are not particularly good for us. And in fact, I think they're making us, they're increasing our body mass past what is ideal. They are, combine that with sedentary life, combine that with, I think, generalized unhappiness as the system winds down, and sort of generalized craziness. And there's that old song, if you're happy and you know it, then your face will surely show it. And don't think that's always true. And when I look at pictures of 1920, a lot of the people aren't looking particularly happy there either. But leave that aside, they are at least, I can't talk about all this without at least briefly bringing up Weston Price and his discussion of, he went to look at, he was a dentist who went to look at various indigenous peoples, and he started off wondering why their teeth were so good. And what he ended up finding is that their facial structure was actually much different than modern humans. And it was because of the foods that they were given from infancy. And partly there was a lot more chewing of tougher foods. And so their jaws would become more developed and stronger. And also, have you ever wondered, before I had braces put on my teeth when I was a teenager, they had to pull 7 or 8 teeth because my mouth was too small or the teeth were too big or something. And have you ever wondered why evolutionarily we would develop with mouths too small for the number of teeth? That seems like kind of not a particularly good adaptation, but it ends up it's not true. The problem is that our mouths have been made too small by our diet and by the long version of the modern potato chips. The 2000-year, the agricultural version of modern potato chips. And so, the topic was, this is your brain on junk food. And this is your brain on junk food I can do very quickly, which is, like, I have some bread here. I don't eat carbs. I don't eat very many carbs at all anymore, but I have bread that I throw out for birds and stuff. And man, the bread smells so good. Sometimes when I'm throwing it out, I'll just, hold it under my nose, take a nice deep breath and remember the good old days, and then throw it out. So, there's something very attractive about these carbs. There's a reason they're high energy. There's a reason we crave sugar. And sugar, I've read, I don't know if this is true, but I've read multiple places that sugar is as addictive as cocaine. Again, I don't know if that's true, so don't cite me on it, but I've read it in multiple places, which means it must be true. I've even read it on the internet. Anyway, that I know sugar is really addictive, that I eat some. If I don't eat sugar for a while, or I don't eat many carbs for a while, I'm actually okay. But then I eat some, and it's like half hour later, it's like I get this craving. I want more of it. And it's the same with the potato chips, because they're simple carbs, and they just, convert to sugars pretty quickly, which explains the bad A1C and also the extra 20 pounds I shouldn't have. So what's my point? My point is, I am in the midst of this myself. But I think it's like a doctor friend of mine says, that correct diagnosis is the first step toward proper treatment. And if we, and I think that we should spend some time first just noticing, look at the photos yourself, see if you find them accurate. Go to, and I'm not picking on poor people with this because it's really the only store left in town here. Go to Walmart, or go to Safeway. It doesn't actually matter what store you go to. Just go to a baseball game. It doesn't matter. And look and ask yourself. And I'm not even saying that if you go to a baseball game, you shouldn't have a hot dog. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a bag of potato chips if you feel like it. It's just as a routine part of our diet, I think they are doing dreadful things to us. The real point that I wanted to get to at the end of this is to simply say that I can't really talk about this is your brain on junk food. I can talk about that in terms of craving, addiction, all that. But really what we have to talk about is the brain. The brain is part of the body, and this is your entire body on junk food. And if you want this is your entire body on junk food, all you have to do is look around, and 90% of the people you see, they're going to be an example.